recognized symbol of excellence for your entertainment.
The heaviest of heavy metal.
Welcome to Machino Music, a show that puts the music in Machino music, with your host, me, Brett Strong. Today on Machino Music, we'll be talking about bands and artists that went heavy metal. It's something we're calling When They Went Heavy Metal. Only the heaviest of metals. Good afternoon, everybody. When They Went Heavy Metal. While back, did When They Went New Wave. And I was sort of thinking about some of these other When They Went shows, and I thought, there's a couple, I think, that went heavy metal. Now, more kind of went new wave. That was kind of a thing. But, heavy metal was also pretty big, and there were some bands and artists that kind of did a bit of that. I was going to wear a battle jacket for this episode, but I have not finished making it. That's my little craft. So I wore a Def Leppard shirt. I know not really the heaviest of metals, but, it's a new shirt. I like this shirt. One of my favorite heavy metal logos. But I will wear a battle jacket on a heavy metal show one of these days.
One of these days!
This fluff's flying all over the place here. Alright, so When They Went Heavy Metal. Again, these are just sort of ones that I picked. It might be more than because I forgot about. These are ones that I found in my collection and just thought there was something to talk about. A little bit of meat on the bone, a little bit of metal on the bone. So, yeah, that's what I want to do here. Yeah, great. I just realized the first one I want to talk about, I couldn't find the tape. And I just realized I don't have it here. Yeah, I couldn't find it. That's why I don't have it. Great. But anyway, the first one I want to talk about is Heart. So I guess I have to point up to it. Yeah, the album Private Audition, which I would say is my favorite Heart album. I actually really love that album. They were kind of one of those bands you could say were already kind of sort of heavy metal. They were like heavy metal pioneer. I mean, a song like Barracuda is definitely kind of a heavy metal song. And also like Magic Man, stuff like that. Even like the heavier parts on it, like Crazy for You, or Crazy on You, I mean. But yeah, Heart were kind of already sort of a heavy metal band. But I think on this album, Private Audition, this is when I think they were like, okay, let's go into this heavy metal thing, because it's like early 80s. Heavy metal's huge. So Cities Burning, kicking it off, that's a heavy, heavy song. It still got that acoustic guitar that Heart was known for, because they always mix the acoustic guitars with the electrics, so you kind of get that bit of everything. But, yeah, whoa, that intro, that's a heavy, heavy song. Yeah. Love that song, one of my favorite Heart songs. And also the song they did for Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which wasn't used in the movie, but was, I think, used on the TV show. That's a pretty heavy song. There's some pretty heavy moments on this album. And also you got to mention their self-titled album, Heart. This one had all the big hits on it, the big radio hits, the big MTV hits. They even kind of looked like a hair metal band, glam metal band, because that was the thing. It was more kind of the look that they were going for at this time. The big hair. Ann and Nancy Wilson really, and the other guys in the band all kind of doing the thing. But there's a couple songs on here that I would say are like real heavy metal songs and don't really sound like anything else Heart was kind of doing even like in the 70s, because it does sound more like 80s metal. And that's when a lot of these bands sort of went heavy metal, was like in the 80s. The song The Wolf, wow, what a heavy song that is. Great riff on that. Also, Shell Shock is really heavy. So, yeah, I had to mention Heart. And I had a copy, a cassette. So I could shake it around, make that cassette sound. I can't do it because I couldn't find the damn thing. Hell. Alright, next, talk about Robert Palmer. Now, it took 2 albums out here. First one I'll talk about is the one that really, I mean, he'd done Riptide with Addicted to Love, which kind of had that heavy metal sound. He also did the Power Station somewhere in the middle there. But right here, 1988, he creates his own version of heavy metal with Heavy Nova, because he really liked bossa nova rhythms and also heavy metal rhythms. So he mixed it together and created his own thing, but he went heavy metal here. Simply Irresistible. I mean, that could have been a hair metal song. That could have been a big glam metal song, but it's, it sounds like Robert Palmer. It's funkier, it's sexy. But, give that to, Joe Blow hair metal band. They can make that into a truly heavy metal song. So that's definitely, Robert Palmer going heavy metal. Some of the really cool ones on here. Disturbing Behavior, More Than Ever, Casting a Spell. But this is really, it still sounds like Robert Palmer, but it's a bit fuller, bit bigger sound. And more just a little bit because he's calling it Heavy Nova. But this album, Honey, from 1994, he's keeping right on the heavy metal thing. And there's some heavy songs on here. His cover of Girl You Want by Devo is really heavy. Takes this new wave song and turns it into this big heavy metal song, while still keeping kind of the synthy, kind of the new wave, but it's like so heavy. Wow. Couldn't believe that cover when I first heard it. Great Robert Palmer song. Close to the Edge. Wham Bam Boogie. I mean, there's some heavy stuff on this record. Yeah. So Robert Palmer, he was into heavy metal. He created his own version of heavy metal, as we keep saying, with Heavy Nova. So, yeah. Now this one, it's kind of a cheat but Alice Cooper. Now I include these albums, Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell, because this was when Alice just went full out heavy metal. I mean, he was an early heavy metal pioneer, but in the 70s, they weren't really calling it heavy metal yet. It was still kind of new. They didn't really know what this thing. There was like still hard rock, rock and roll, whatever. They were just calling it all different things. They didn't really know kind of what to categorize it. But definitely by the 80s, it was heavy metal. And Alice Cooper was doing new wave before this. So this is him really going all out heavy metal on this record. There's still a bit of like some synthesizer kind of stuff, some new wave kind of stuff on here. Like Trick Bag is kind of new wave. Also, He's Back, The Man Behind the Mask is like total synth. But this is this is definitely his real foray into glam metal, hair metal. His big comeback album, the big comeback concert, The Nightmare Returns on MTV. Then you get to this record, Raise Your Fist and Yell, which is just a big proclamation type record, Raise Your Fist and Yell. Get some big heavy songs on here. You got Roses on White Lace, which is like pretty thrashy. That's a really heavy riff on that one. Chop, Chop, Chop. Freedom, kicking it off. Big heavy song. Big heavy riff. And this is the time we also had Kane Roberts in the band. Big muscle man, big rip titan playing the guitar. Which looks ridiculous, but like the guy could play. And I'm sure he like loved the freak show element of it. Was like, this guy looks ridiculous, but he can actually play. Kane Roberts. A lot of his guitar playing really played into this. But yeah, Alice, I mean, he'd already kind of, like I said, already kind of been heavy metal, but this was kind of his big foray into heavy metal, and he stayed there ever since. But it really started with those 86, 87 records, where it's like, I actually wouldn't think he was doing new wave before. It's different. Okay. Next, I'm going to go Rolling Stones, Steel Wheels. Now, this is an interesting one. This is 1989. And the Rolling Stones were kind of a bit of a mess at the time. They just put out the very messy, very divisive 1986 album, Dirty Work, was not a lot of people's favorite. I actually really like the Dirty Work album. I know people don't really like that record, but I like it. It's a messy record, I will admit. There's no chemistry with the band. They're just all over the place. But there's some good stuff on it. So they took a break, did some solo projects. And then they come back with Steel Wheels, massive tour. And there's a few songs on here that are pretty heavy. Pretty heavy for the Stones. And again, they were ones that were kind of a pioneer. I mean, how many hair metal bands were influenced by the Rolling Stones? But this one kicking off with Sad, Sad, Sad. Kind of a heavy tune. But the one on here that just always stood out for me, and is one of my favorite Rolling Stones songs, is Hold On To Your Hat. I mean, that's a heavy metal song. Give that to a heavy metal band, like a real heavy metal band. They're going to turn that into a really heavy tune. And wow, the Stones did a real good job on it. That's a heavy song. That's why it's one of my favorite Rolling Stones songs, because it's so, the energy of it is so insane. I love it. Rock in a Hard Place. Slipping Away. I mean, there's heavy moments, I think, all throughout this record. And if you're going to call anything the Stones kind of did a heavy metal album, I would probably say this one. There might be some others. But they were kind of all over. They're in a very odd kind of place in the 80s. I mean, even the Dirty Work record, I mean, has like some heavy metal moments, like One Hit to the Body is kind of going in that vein. That was really kind of the only hit from that record, unless you want to count Harlem Shuffle, which a lot of people don't. Kind of sunk the Stones for a bit. I have to poo, everybody. Sorry for my vulgarity there, but just give me a moment. There. Alright. We can continue now. Sorry about the interruption. I changed my shirt, too. That just happened. Alright, getting back into these albums here. Them or Us, Frank Zappa. Now, Zappa did a little bit of everything. He was a favorite of a lot of heavy metal bands. He was a big influence on Alice Cooper early on, signed him to his first deal. But there's a lot of heavy metal on this album. A lot of a bit of everything. I mean, this was kind of his takeoff, sort of, on a lot of these genres, heavy metal. Especially, it was 1984, so MTV is basically satirizing MTV a lot on here, especially with the song Be In My Video. But there's, like I said, a lot of heavy metal on here. It starts off with a doo-wop cover, The Closer You Are by the Channels. But then you get, by track 3, you get Yahazna, which is a backwards song. All the vocals are backwards. His kids are on it. I believe Moon Unit, I know, is one of the vocals on it. Frank himself, everybody's sort of, like, the whole band, everybody's sort of in there. Heavy riff, heavy metal riff on that. Charlena, which I believe the original version was on Chunga's Revenge. I should have looked at it to clarify. My Zappas or timelines are kind of all over the place. I know there's different versions of Charlena. He always did different versions of songs. There was a version, a very early version that was on, or a later version that was on the Lost Episodes. I don't remember that. So much Zappa. And just to remember all the timelines of Zappa. I just remember the first time I heard the songs. So, but, yeah, the Charlena on here starts kind of very normal. Kind of like, okay, it's kind of a doo-wop song. Bit of kind of like an R&B kind of feel to this. Kind of a soul feel. Then it gets, the guitar solos are insane. Heavy metal guitar solos. It's Steve Vai, who was credited in this album and other albums around the time in the 80s for Zappa. the impossible guitar parts, because Steve Vai was that guy. He was up for the challenge. He was going to play those impossible guitar parts. He was the only guy who could do it. But Dweezil, Frank's boy, he's absolutely insane guitar player. And considering this is 1984, so he's like a teenager, maybe like 15, 16 years old, maybe younger than that. It's insane, his playing. Like, wow. I guess having Frank Zappa as a dad and, having like, people like Eddie Van Halen come over to the house and, Frank wasn't like really into that kind of, that like heavy metal, but Dweezil listened to it, and Frank could appreciate it from just the musicianship because there were some great players during that time. So, this is just, couldn't believe that when I first heard it. That guitar solo on Charlena. There's also Stevie's Spanking on here, which is a pretty heavy song. That's a really heavy metal song. All Steve Vai playing on that. Dweezil, I believe, also plays guitar on that. It's them trading riffs, trading licks back and forth. And that song is about a real story that happened to Steve Vai, where he was getting... what's the best word for it? I would say getting whacked off by a lady. The hairbrush was involved. I don't know. The whole story is in the real Frank Zappa book, and it is graphic. I read that as a kid. Yeah. I was quite naive then, too, so I think a lot of it went over my head. And when I first listened to Stevie Spanking, no idea. No idea. Maybe the song on this here is not a heavy metal song, but Baby Take Your Teeth Out, I had no idea. That was about like taking your teeth out to try, like a gummy BJ. No idea. Old people getting it on, taking teeth out. I thought it was just a goofy song about taking teeth out because it's funny. No, it's about giving a pipe job with just using the gums. Maybe take your teeth out, try it sometime. This is one of my favorite Frank albums, even just to talk about this. Even just some of the songs. In France, so funny. It's kind of a heavier tune. Johnny Guitar Watson playing and singing on that. What a weird voice. Great voice. Nobody sounded like Johnny Guitar Watson. I just want to talk about some of this record just while I have it here. And In France, actually, I found there's a version of In France. I think it was like from like the late 70s, before it was on this album, where they did a takeoff, a parody of the song Cars by Gary Newman. It's so funny. Before they figured it out, so it was like maybe 1980 or so. But yeah, it was so funny. But yeah, I always liked In France. Kind of why I never want to go to France because of that song. Mark Son's Chicken actually is kind of, as I remember, I got a heavy song on here. The title track's pretty heavy. Guitar, Frank just ripping. And their cover of Whippin' Post by Allman Brothers is pretty heavy. And there's, of course, that poster comes out from the wall. And here. Yeah. So yeah, Them or Us. There's a lot of heavy metal on that album. Like if you're like take a Frank Zappa record and say, yeah, Them or Us is pretty heavy metal. Next one I want to talk about, this is a guy nobody really talks about. Barnet Dogs by Russ Ballard. Russ Ballard, very underrated songwriter. Started out with Argent, wrote a lot of songs. He had a lot of songs that a lot of bands later covered. Songs that you know. Of course, some of the bigger ones. God Gave Rock and Roll to You, that Kiss had a huge hit with. That was a Russ Ballard tune, originally done by Argent. And then also the song, another Kiss tune, with the solo albums, Ace Frehley, New York Groove, that was written by Russ Ballard for a group called Hello. He was just sort of in a bunch of different groups. And then he had some solo hits as well. He also wrote the song Liar, which Three Dog Night had a big hit with. So a lot of people have covered his tunes. And this album, Barnett Dogs, has a couple of songs that heavy metal bands covered, and it's a pretty heavy record. I mean, I've listened to a fair bit of Russ Ballard. A lot of it is just he kind of did a bit of everything. It's like mostly just standard rock and some sort of like maybe a little bit of synth. But this record is one I keep going back to. I just listened to this again before I did this episode. And this is a pretty heavy record. This is 1979, so this is kind of like still early heavy metal before the big blow up of heavy metal. But there's some songs on here that you could totally see why bands covered them. Like Renee Didn't Do It. Fantastic song kicking it off. Really cool. On the Rebound is a fantastic song. Great heavy song. And Uriah Heep did a cover of that on their Abominog album. And they added some synthesizers to it. I actually prefer kind of the Uriah Heep version. I mean, I love the Russ Ballard original. But the Uriah Heep, because these synthesizers are just cool. I like their arrangement of it. But yeah, that's a really good. On the Rebound is great. Also, the song Riding with the Angels, great heavy metal song. Bruce Dickinson's first band. Before he was in Iron Maiden, the band Samson did a cover of that song. There's a video floating around on YouTube of a live performance of that song. Also, you can listen to the Samson record that's from. Really good. Kicks off that record. So good. Yeah. Also, Beware. For some reason, I think Beware might have been also covered by somebody. Now that I see the title, I just noticed it now. It keeps getting stuck in my head. I should have looked it up before I did this episode, but I didn't because I'm a poop head. But yeah, this album cover is so metal. So metal. Barnett Dogs, these like skeleton dogs. And like the writing is, and look at him on the back there, looking all metal, holding his guitar. Kind of Gary Moore-ish looking there. I paid $10 for this. A nice copy, it says. Yeah. I'll put that over here, because I'll put it on the stack, it'll fall over. And I'm going to close out here with Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, Up Your Alley. Now, Joan Jett, really always just kind of straightforward rock, although she is considered the godmother of punk. So she did mostly like punk rock pioneer, of course with the Runaways as well. But this is where I felt she kind of went just like, okay, heavy metal's big. This is 1988. I mean, you get a song like I Hate Myself for Loving You. That's a heavy metal song right there. That's a hair metal, glam metal song right there. Riding with James Dean. She does a cover of I Want to Be Your Dog. The godmother of punk. Covering the godfather of punk, Iggy Pop. Iggy and the Stooges. And she does a really heavy version. That's a heavy metal version of that song. It's an early punk song, even kind of maybe sort of early heavy metal. I mean, because like 1969, nobody really knew what punk was. And it's just, in Detroit, a lot of heavy metal came out of Detroit. So you could say it's even kind of an early heavy metal song. And here's Joan making it really heavy. Just Like in the Movies, great tune. Back It Up, yeah. Some great tunes on here. And also just how she's looking, her and the other Blackhearts at this time. Very metal. The big hair. And just Joan on this cover. Look at that. The leather outfit. I mean, this is one of the most metal album covers. She looks so hot, so cool on here. Love Joan Jett. Another Joan Jett show. Joan Jett album ranking. Joan Jett top 10 songs. I love me some Joan Jett. One of my heroes. So cool. So, yeah. I want to talk about that record. I'm going to keep showing that because she looks so fantastic on that cover. So, there you go. Those are what I would say, just what I could find. Just I had my collection and just some that I could think of when they went heavy metal. There might be some more that I wasn't thinking of. Maybe you can help with that. There might be some you thought of that, feel free to share. But that's the ones I think when they went heavy metal. And we're going to be doing another one of these when they went. We're going to be doing disco. Because a lot went disco. So that'll be coming next week. So be prepared for that. So If you're a fan of heavy metal, fan of any of these bands, I hope you enjoyed this. That's it for this week. Until we meet again, this is Brett Strong saying good journey.